Hey, what is up guys, it is Radeon Hardware, and in today's video we're gonna build the ultimate 1440p gaming PC monster featuring the brand new Radeon RX 6700 XT graphics card. In this video I want to run you guys through the entire build process step by step, how to put this PC build together. Then we're gonna test it out in 15 of the current most popular games, including ray tracing. We're also gonna test out the performance, not just at 1440p high settings where this GPU is meant for, but we're also gonna look at what kind of performance you can expect running at 4K. Now in case you want to build this PC too, all PC parts I'm using are linked up down below. Now before we get into the video, hey, my name is Robin, and on this channel we benchmark and build gaming PCs using the latest PC parts on the market. And so if that is something you're interested in, smash the like button down below and hit the subscribe button and notification bell, and let me know what price target we should try and hit for future videos on the channel. Now speaking of pricing, this machine will cost you around $1,200 using the following listed parts. Now at this budget you will be able to max out all games out there in 1080p, and at 1440p you will see well over 60 FPS even when maxing out the graphics. Now even 4K resolution is possible thanks to 12 gigs of VRAM. And just so you guys know, we're gonna dive into the gaming performance in much greater detail after we completed the build. Anyway, inside this machine, apart from the Radeon RX 6700 XT, we find the 3rd gen 6-core Ryzen CPU, 16 gigs of RAM, as well as a lightning fast M.2 drive, and everything housed inside is minimalistic, great airflow and ZXTKs. So let's get started with the base of today's build, the CPU, RAM and motherboard. And for today's build I ended up picking the Asus ROG Strix B550 Gaming-F. B550 chipset based boards are usually stripped off pretty heavily compared to the full-fledged X570s, but that's quite not the case with this one from Asus. The Gaming-F got dual M.2 slots with heatsink, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, heaps of USB 3 ports, as well as beefed up VRAMs with enough juice to handle even 6-core Ryzen processors. Now while I do love this board, it is a little bit overkill for this particular build, and so if you wanna save $50 or so without really losing anything that valuable, you can easily opt for the Tomahawk Max coming in at $115 instead, without having an impact on the frame rate. Now time to install our processor, and for today's build I gone for the Ryzen 5 3600 coming in at $199. Now this is a 6-core CPU with 12 threads with a base clock of 3.6 and 4.3 GHz turbo. And having a look at the CPU performance, we see that the Ryzen 3600 is a very compelling CPU for its price tag, and opting for a 6-core processor is a great sweet spot or a middle ground between price and performance, in 2021. Now since we're gonna use the included stock cooler, we're gonna need to remove the retention frame from the motherboard, and installing the processor in the socket is very easy. First up, you wanna open up the metal arm. Secondly, you wanna locate what's looking like a golden triangle on the processor, and you wanna line up this triangle with the triangle located on the socket. Then you simply drop the processor into the socket and gently move the metal arm all the way down until it locks in place, and voila, our CPU is installed. A cooler is also included with a 3600, and typically these used to be pretty bad, but this one is pretty good actually. And if you're not interested in doing any overclocking, I actually don't see any reason not to use this one, as it will save us a couple of dollars. And the cooler installment is also very simple. Position the CPU cooler over the 4 spring screws, and using a screwdriver follow a diagonal pattern across the CPU cooler like this to tighten each spring screw with a full turn. And with all 4 spring screws connected to the backplate, tighten them until you feel resistance. Lastly, you don't want to forget to connect the fan power cable to the CPU cooler to the CPU fan header on the motherboard. For our system memory, I'm gonna go with this black Corsair Vengeance kit with RGB coming in at around $85 give or take. Now these have a rated speed of 3200 MHz, and with that we are gonna hit the sweet spot for the 3rd gen Ryzen CPUs. And as we can see from this image here, a fast clocked RAM kit can give you a frame rate boost in comparison to a slow clock kit. Now installing these two is actually as simple as it looks. We're gonna wanna populate the 2nd and the 4th DIMM slot, so pull back the toggle for these two and simply plug them in just like so. And with that done, let's go ahead and install our super speedy storage device. This one coming from Kingston with 500 GB of storage. And so what you want to do is you want to locate the M.2 slot, which we find right here. You want to remove this heat shield. Then gently slide the M.2 unit into the socket. Finally take that little screw and hold it down and screw it down until it stops, and finally reinstall the heat shield again. Now we can go ahead and take our whole base of our build and install it in our case. And for today's build I ended up picking the NZXT H510 Elite for $149. All included fans plus the LED strip are hooked up to a smart hub where you can customize things like color, lightning effects, as well as set fan speed, etc. Now, although we find 4 pre-installed fans here guys, the cooling isn't going to be the best in this case, and this is because of the solid front. However, that being said, you don't gonna have to worry about running into thermal throttling on our components. Also guys, if you wanna get away cheaper here, NZXT is also selling a variant without the LEDs and smart hub that is based on the very same frame. And this case is actually $80 cheaper, and you'll find this case linked up down below as well. Now in order to get access to the interior of the case, all we need to do is undo this thumb screw to remove the tempered glass side window. Now we can take our whole assembly and install it in our case, and we're gonna use the screws that comes provided by NZXT. And with the board installed, before we move on to power supply and graphics, now is a good time to connect the chassis cables that take care of the front audio and USB. Let's start with USB 3, and this is what this connector looks like. Next we have this USB cable. Moving on to front audio, and this cable goes to the left side corner. Lastly, we also have the front panel connectors, and these can be found on the lower right side. With that done, let's go ahead and install our power supply, and I chose the CX 650 watt unit from Corsair. Now I didn't have the CX 650 at the studio while recording, so that is why I'm demonstrating on the CV650. Anyway, this is a compact and silent and high quality PSU with 80+ bronze efficiency certification, coming in at around $74. Make sure guys you got the fan facing downwards, then gently slide the PSU into place and secure it. We're gonna do a couple of cables and wiring before installing our graphics, and first up we got the 24-pin power for our motherboard, and this one goes to a connector on the mid right side of the board. Last cable we got is the 8-pin power for our CPU, and this one goes all the way up to the top left side corner. It is finally time to install our graphics, and for today's build we find the Radeon RX 6700 XT. This particular model comes from Power Color and it uses AMD's reference cooler. Now based on the RDNA 2 architecture, the Navi 2 based Radeon RX 6700 XT offers excellent 1440p gaming performance. We also need to talk about the prices, because right now, yeah, these have spiked through the roof in general for all GPUs out there, and this is not just related to the 6700 XT. This is unfortunately due to high demand and low supply. For the time being at least, it is a very unfortunate time to be a PC gamer, Anyway, plug in the graphics card and take these two PCIe cables and plug it into our graphics card just like so. And what is left to do is to flip the case around, whack on the side panel, and we have officially completed our $1,200 gaming PC build. Let's fire up some games and let's take a look at what this PC performs like. And on your screen now we are looking at the performance numbers that I gathered up from today's build, and I ended up running 15 games in both 1440p as well as 4K resolution, and generally, as can be seen, the RX 6700 XT is powerful enough to run most games at 1440p max settings, while at 4K, in many games you'll be able to run your favorite game at medium to high settings, although some games, such as Cyberpunk 2077, settling for low would be my recommendation. Let's have a greater look at some of the games tested, and first up we have Horizon Zero Dawn, starting at 1440p, where I went for the highest settings and were able to reach 60 FPS on average with a few dips below the magic mark. At 4K medium we achieved around 55 FPS. Next up we have Death Stranding at 1440p max settings, which, as can be seen, runs fantastic with an average of 117 FPS, whereas in 4K we saw 66 FPS on average, again using the highest settings that the game offers. Moving on to CSGO, once again starting with 1440p, going for competitive settings, we saw around 335 FPS on average, and jumping to 4K at the same graphic settings resulted in about 305 FPS. Doom Eternal is next, and here I'm opting for the Ultra Nightmare graphics preset. Let's begin with 1440p. This resulted in around 164 FPS, and at 4K we saw 73 FPS, again using the Ultra Nightmare preset. Moving on to Overwatch, and here I'm picking the epic settings, and this results in about 140 FPS on average at 1440p. At 4K resolution we are still way above the magic 60 FPS mark at 131 FPS on average. Valorant runs very smooth as well with an average of 255 FPS, and if we look at the settings, I went for everything maxed out, running at 1440p. At 4K resolution, that number changed to 204 FPS on average. Cyberpunk 2077, as many of you guys know, supports ray tracing, which is now supported by the Radeon GPUs in their latest 1.2 update. Let's first take a look at 1440p high settings. This results in 60 FPS on average, and if we step up to 4K we're able to reach 55 FPS. This however requires that you dial down the settings to low. And at this stage guys, the game actually looks pretty dull and flat, so I recommend playing around a little bit with resolution scaling, and I think this will yield the best results between gameplay smoothness and graphics detail. Now as a bonus, here is a ray tracing comparison between AMD's latest GPU stand against Nvidia's latest offerings, and as we can see, although AMD now offers ray tracing support on their GPUs, it is not delivering as smooth performance numbers as Team Green. And this is something that you do have to take into consideration if ray tracing is important to you. Again guys, all PC components can be found down below. We now have an official Discord server up and running, and if you want to become a part of the community, ask questions either to me or any of the awesome people on the channel, you definitely want to go ahead and join the Discord server today, and the link can be found down below. Now watch either of these two videos, and I will see you guys in the next video.